The metal crunched under tires once again. His mailbox, shattered and bent, lay face down in the dirt like a soldier who had taken too many blows. They thought he would stay silent, that he would accept it like all the other insults life had thrown at him. But this time, they had no idea what was coming. The first time it happened, he thought it was a mistake. Maybe a careless driver, maybe the rain-slicked road had made someone swerve. But the second time, the third time, and the 10th time, there was no denying it. Each morning he would walk the gravel path to the end of his ranch, only to find the same scene: splintered wood, scattered mail, and tire tracks pressed deep into the soil. It wasn't just vandalism, it was a message. He bent down, lifting the broken pieces in his calloused hands. The scent of damp earth clung to him, mixed with the bitter tang of iron from rusted nails. His mailbox was more than a box of letters. It was a marker, a quiet symbol of belonging, standing tall at the edge of his land. To see it crushed again and again felt like watching strangers spit on his very name. Neighbors noticed, but no one spoke. Cars slowed when he stood out by the road, their drivers pretending not to see him. The silence around him felt heavier than the crash of metal. For weeks he said nothing. He repaired the mailbox, hammered new posts into the soil, painted over the dents. And every time it was torn down once more, run over by the same group that called themselves protectors of the neighborhood. They were supposed to uphold order, yet they targeted him with cruel precision. He carried himself with quiet dignity. His broad shoulders showed the strength of a man who had endured more than most would ever understand. But it was his eyes, calm, steady, unwavering, that revealed something deeper. He was not a man of loud protest or empty threats. He had been tested in harsher places, under skies filled with smoke and fire. Where others panicked, he had learned to remain still, to wait, to watch. Behind those eyes lived memories of deserts where the air burned with heat, where silence was broken only by the hum of helicopters and the distant crack of rifles. He had stood shoulder to shoulder with men who never came home. He had carried their weight, their silence, their unfinished stories. That kind of past reshapes a man. It teaches him patience. It teaches him the strength of waiting until the right moment comes. So when they mocked him by running over his mailbox again, he did not shout. He did not argue. He let the silence grow. Each wrecked post became a mark in his memory, each splinter a quiet reminder. And when the time finally came, he would not answer them with words. He would answer them with something they would never forget. Long before his ranch became a battlefield for something as small as a mailbox, his life had been defined by sacrifice. He was a man who knew the sound of boots sinking into desert sand, who remembered the weight of a rifle pressed against tired shoulders, and the silence of nights when stars looked down on men too, young to bear the burdens placed upon them. He had enlisted not for glory, but for duty. He believed in protecting others, even strangers. He believed that courage was not loud, but steady, like a heartbeat that refuses to quit. In the service, he saw both the best and the worst of humanity. He had held brothers in arms as they bled out beneath skies filled with dust. He had carried the memories of their last words like sacred stones, heavy but unshakable. When he finally came home, he carried scars no one could see, scars that made him value peace more than conflict. The ranch became his refuge. Wide fields stretched under the open sky, the smell of cut grass drifting through the air in summer, and the quiet rhythm of animals grazing in the distance. It was a place where his soul could rest, where silence was no longer filled with danger but with calm. He built his home with his own hands, every nail hammered with patience, every fence post set with care. It was not just land, it was his sanctuary, the soil where he intended to leave a legacy. But peace does not always last. The Homeowners Association, known for its strict rules and endless demands, had never looked kindly on him. Some whispered, others stared too long, and though no one spoke it aloud, he felt the weight of being judged differently. The mailboxes on other properties stood untouched. His alone was crushed again and again, until the pattern was too sharp to ignore. At first, he tried to believe it was nothing more than mischief. But then one evening, as he returned from the city, he saw it with his own eyes. A marked vehicle, tires cutting across the grass, metal screeching as his mailbox crumpled under the weight. The driver laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that hung in the air before the car sped away. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. In that moment, the weight of every silent injustice he had endured pressed down on him. He remembered standing guard in foreign lands, protecting those who could not protect themselves. And now, here in his own home, he was treated with the same cold disregard he had once fought against. He felt the heat rise in his chest, but he did not explode. He did not chase the car. Instead, he stood still, his shadow long against the fading light. For all their noise, he knew that true strength required no shouting. He would not let them drag him into anger. He would let the silence grow heavier until they could no longer ignore it. And when the time came, his response would be quiet, precise, and unforgettable. The days that followed were marked by a strange quiet, the kind that builds pressure without a sound. Every morning, the man walked down the gravel path, boots crunching in steady rhythm, and each morning the mailbox was destroyed again. The wood posts that once stood proud now splintered into the earth like broken bones. Torn envelopes scattered in the wind, their edges curling in the damp. Tire marks crossed his land like scars, pressed deep and careless. The neighbors saw it. Some peered through curtains, others drove by slower than usual. Their silence weighed heavier than the acts themselves. No one spoke to him. No one asked questions. Their silence was a shield, but not for him. It was a shield for their comfort, their distance. To acknowledge what was happening meant admitting it was wrong, and they were not ready to carry that burden. He said nothing. Each night he hammered the mailbox back together, planting it in the soil with a patience that unnerved those who watched from a distance. His silence became its own kind of defiance, a refusal to be broken, a refusal to give them the victory of rage. But the pattern grew darker. What began as random cruelty became routine, almost ritual. Twice a week, sometimes more, the mailbox was flattened, the sound of tires rolling across gravel, echoing into the night, before vanishing into the silence of the fields. They wanted to humiliate him, to remind him of his place. And yet he never confronted them, not once. Instead, he began to study. He marked the angle of the tire tracks, the direction of the vehicles, the time of night when the attacks most often came. His silence was not weakness. It was calculation. At the edge of his land by the broken post, he would kneel and press his hand into the soil. He could feel the rhythm of the earth, the pull of patience. Each splinter he gathered became part of a plan only he understood. The cruelty grew bolder. One evening, when the last light of day painted the sky in gold, he saw a car slow down at the edge of his property. The window rolled down and a voice called out. Not words of greeting, not words of kindness, but mocking laughter that cut like a blade. He did not move. He did not answer. He simply stood tall, his silhouette framed against the burning horizon. His silence was louder than any shout could have been. And though they laughed, there was something in his stillness that unsettled them. They could break wood, they could crush steel, but they could not shake the calm resolve of a man who had already walked through fire in another life. He carried himself with the weight of someone who knew what true battles looked like. The man was waiting for the moment when the lesson he carried within him would be revealed. A lesson about dignity, about strength, about the kind of justice that comes not with words, but with actions no one sees coming until it's too late. Strength isn't always loud. It doesn't always shout or strike back. Sometimes it just stands tall in silence. And in that silence, arrogance crumbles. Respect is free. But the lack of it can cost everything. That mailbox wasn't revenge, it was dignity. A reminder that true strength endures quietly. What would you have done in his place? If you believe in silent strength, subscribe for more stories like this.